Thanks, Stan. Rob Bovett joins me on the line again. Rob, I'm wondering if you can respond to the argument that people won't be able to afford a doctor's visit each time they need to go to the doctor to get cold medicine.
Well, a couple of things. I mean, we have 4 actual years worth of experience here in Oregon, and we were told the sky would fall here as well, and it didn't. So let's kind of examine why it didn't fall. First off, a lot of folks have already switched to over-the-counter alternatives. Your shelves are lined with all kinds of alternative products. We're only talking about actually 15 products left that contain pseudoephedrine and their generic equivalents. The second is we went to what's called Schedule 3, which means that you don't actually technically have to have a doctor's visit. Schedule 3 allows for simply a phone call into the pharmacy. And those of our consumers that still want pseudoephedrine have found that as a viable alternative. But I think the third and an important thing to point out, and believe me, I'm not trying to tell your state what it ought to do or not ought to do. I mean, I'm here just to talk about the Oregon experience, but really I'm the first to admit that it is a sacrifice, and no doubt about it. Your legislators, your policymakers have to weigh the benefits and the burdens. And from what I understand from my colleagues in your state, the burdens of local toxic meth labs are phenomenal and out of control and getting worse. And so you have to weigh the damage done to your society and your community and your state from these meth labs catching fire and blowing up and poisoning kids and poisoning the environment and really posing a huge threat and risk to everyone that comes into contact with them, in addition to the meth that's manufactured, versus access or better access to a decongestant. And I'm not slamming the pseudoephedrine as a decongestant, but it doesn't cure cancer. It doesn't cure the common cold. I know a lot of people rely upon it. I used to use it all the time. I suffer from allergies, and I get it. But you really have to weigh those benefits and burdens. And, Oregon, for us, it was, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it was the clear conclusion that we reached, and the results speak for themselves.
Now, just a couple seconds left here, but just wondering, you say you don't dispense advice, but what should states like Indiana be doing?
Well, very much like what I shared with my Mississippi colleagues in the Mississippi press, examine the facts and examine what can be accomplished through electronic tracking, examine what can be accomplished through returning pseudoephedrine to a prescription drug as it was prior to 1976. Essentially, the way I view it is we let a genie out of the bottle in 1976, and we've been trying to put Band-Aids on it ever since, and it just hasn't worked. And, there's a laundry list of parade of horribles, frankly false parade of horribles that the pharmaceutical industry trots out, but I don't necessarily blame them. They're protecting a $1 billion a year industry. And so I think you really have to peel back the layers, examine the real facts, cast aside the rhetoric, and make policy decisions based upon what the facts are on the ground.
Mr. Bovett, thank you so much for joining us. Stan, now back to you.
Thanks, Sarah. And Rob Bovett just mentioned this is a $1 billion a year industry. I wanted to talk in the last few minutes of our show here about the economic impact of having to fight meth in Indiana. What, Senator Dyke, from the state legislature's point of view, is that?
Well, right now we're looking at a very hard economic time for the state of Indiana. Tax revenues are down right now. We need money, we need jobs. But what's happening right now, we're spending close to $2 billion a year on methamphetamines. A lot of that's taxpayers' money for either criminal court system, the jails, children, trying to get them in proper homes. So it's costing taxpayers a lot of money a year that we could be using in other areas in the state of Indiana. So it's a big, big problem for us.
And what about in Posey County, where you don't have a gigantic court system, as you mentioned? Is fighting methamphetamine still a sizable line item there?
It is. For every individual we charge with manufacturing methamphetamine, their court costs, so the attorney being in court, the jury trial, costs on average between $2,000 and $5,000. But that individual goes to prison, and usually for between 2 to 3 years for a first-time offender. It costs $14,000 a year to house an individual at the Department of Corrections. So we're talking $30,000, $35,000 per person. Today in Posey County, before I left Posey County, we had gotten 2 meth labs and arrested 4 individuals for manufacturing methamphetamine. That's a huge outlay, not only directly to the county, but to the state as well.
And Nicole, what about from the point of view of businesses? I mean, we've talked about lobbyists, but that's even sort of an ancillary cost to this whole thing. I mean, what does it cost businesses to know that methamphetamine is being created and trafficked?
I mean, in the broad scheme of the thousands of products that our members sell, profits from over-the-counter cough and cold medications are minimal. And our main concern is the legitimate consumer. And making it a prescription doesn't guarantee that it'll decrease sales of illegitimate users. Illegitimate users, cookers, meth cookers, and manufacturers, they'll find a way to purchase these products, whether you make it a prescription or not.
I don't mean to end on sort of a down note, but I got to thinking, let's assume for a second we are successful in curbing methamphetamine creation and trafficking in Indiana. The nature of drugs, it seems to me, is that there will be another sort of flavor of the week type drug that pops up, and that we're going to have to fight this fight all over again. Does that seem like a possibility? Nicole, let's start with you, and we'll come this way on the panel. I mean, is that something that your clients are concerned about?
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. We have a huge narcotics problem, and prescription only doesn't help that. So I don't think that that'll help PSE drugs in any way. I think that'll still be a problem. And you know, I've heard that in Mexico they've banned PSE, and now they're making meth with something less not as strong. So I think that they're going to find ways to do it.
And Jody, what about is there any need to transition a court system to learn how to deal with methamphetamine versus cocaine versus marijuana, or is it all the same sort of idea?
It's all the same sort of idea in general. I think what I've seen in Posey County, which again, very small rural county, the methamphetamine is overwhelming because of the ability to make it in your bathroom. We just don't have much trafficking. We would pick out the traffickers because we know everybody. So if somebody's wheeling in a Cadillac selling drugs, we pick those people out. We in Posey County have invented a narcotics unit just specifically because of methamphetamine and the cleaning up of labs. I think we could dissolve that unit if the methamphetamine problem went away. It might be a different drug that comes in, but it's going to be trafficked, not something they can cook in their bathroom.
And Senator, real quick, just in 10 or 15 seconds, your opinion?
Well, let me just say this. There's been a number of families call me with major problems with meth and amphetamine use in their families. They've lost their homes, they lost their businesses, they end up getting divorced. They have no where to go. It's cost our county, our state a lot of money, and we need to try to help these families out and help the state out.
Well, my thanks to all of you this evening for your help and your assistance in being here. My thanks as well to my co-host, Sarah Whitmire. Sarah, thanks.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for watching and for listening to tonight's program. Please do send us your questions at infocus@indiana.edu. You can leave a comment there. You can see portions of this show also if you go to indianapublicmedia.org/infocus. Monroe County is one of several places in Indiana trying to raise money for its schools with a November ballot measure. On October's program, we'll talk about the state of education and how to pay for it. Please do join us for that on the next In Focus. Have a good night.
Production support for InFocus is provided by Smithville, a locally owned business serving central and southern Indiana since 1922 with residential and business internet, voice, and security services. Smithville, local pride, global technology. Information at smithville.net. Hoosier Energy, providing electricity for central and southern Indiana electric cooperatives and their member customers. Information at hepn.com, and by viewers like you. Thank you.